You got to operate in truth, right? Operate in truth. Tell the truth.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Gator Truth Florida Football Podcast. I'm Daniel, and on this episode, we're going to take a look at the Gators' 24-11 loss to the Utah Utes in Salt Lake City. For those of you watching on YouTube, or for those of you listening wherever you listen to your podcasts, YouTube can see, and you can probably hear on the podcast, I'm not in my usual setup. I am actually in Salt Lake City in my hotel room, making sure I get this out on my usual, release time during the season. It does feel a little late since the game was on Thursday rather than Saturday, but I can tell you I did not have much reception or good internet while I was traveling around the state of Utah. Utes, you have a beautiful state. If you've not explored it, go explore your state. Gators, if you've never been to Utah, definitely check it out. Beautiful, beautiful state. With that said, welcome everyone. We're going to talk about that Utes win and the Gators loss. I do think that there are some positives here. Many times, we talk about this and we talk about whether or not the Gators did well, not did well. We'll focus on negatives. For this, I'll generally focus on positives just because there is so much negativity out there. And there is lots of justified negativity when it comes to play calling and, just undisciplined play. And you can make excuses. The fact is, we've been preparing for this game since the spring and in the fall, and there's no reason to be saying undisciplined play and 7 players on a field goal unit or 2 players on the same number giving up a crucial first down. There's no reason to see that. With that said, we're going to get into this game. We're going to talk about the offense, the good, bad, ugly, defense, good, bad, and ugly. And to get into it, our first storyline that I talked about going to the game is, would Cam Rising play? And if he did, how healthy would he be? Cam Rising did not play. In fact, neither did second team Utah quarterback. 13 quarterback Bryson Barnes, 4th string quarterback Jackson. They came in and they played really, really well. Or Johnson, not Jackson. I do apologize. And, if you told me Cam Rising doesn't play, our defense holds them to 270 yards, Graham Mertz throws for 300 yards, and we held them for 3 of 13 on third down, I would tell you the Gators win this game. And if you told me Green Reed goes out with a head injury, the Gators win this game, and that's not what happened. Again, we can make excuses or we can just, operate in truth, tell the truth about there were bad things in this game, and there were. But again, I think there are some positives. So to get into it on offense, Graham Mertz, we talked about 333 yards. He did hit some big down the field passes to guys like, Burke and Ricky Pearsall had a 40-yard catch. Even Jonathan Odom had a 23-yard catch as well. Pearsall leading the way with 92 yards. Our first key for the offense was establish the run game. If you take away, Graham Mertz's sack yardage and also the need to end the first half, which was negative 30 yards, we're talking about 3 yards per carry. And that's not good. That's not good at all, especially when one of those carries was a 9-yard end around to start the game to Eugene Wilson. So you take that out as well. And we're talking Trevor Etienne, 7 carries for 25 yards, 3.6 yards per carry. Montrell Johnson, 3 carries for 6 yards. That's 2 yards a carry. And there's questions about, should we have run more? Should we have not? To me, we're running for less than 4 yards a carry. The offensive line is not doing well at all. I believe at that point we are just wasting plays. Maybe our offensive line, if we kept throwing them and doing the same thing over and over again, maybe they would have started blocking. But also, a lot of people call doing the same thing over and over again while expecting a different result. Insanity. So it's I eyes in success is in the eye of the beholder, or and here I don't think it would have been beneficial to keep running against this Utah front seven, even if they lost, as ESPN described it during the game, the quarterback of their defense. And with that said, Graham Mertz did make some great plays, made some not so great plays. I mean, QBR was 30.4, and that's out of 100. Yes, he did have a pretty decent completion percentage, just under 75%. However, the sacks, which most of them weren't on him, some of one or two were. But when I look at the 31 completions, of those 31 completions, 10 of them were for 5 yards or less than 5 yards. And that's how long they went for. That's not even talking about screen passes where we made a guy miss and he runs for 6 yards, or a good screen pass of Montreal Johnson that ended up going for quite the distance. It was a 17-yard play. And again, we did have some good down the field passes, but how many of our completions, we talk about, we ran a shovel pass on 4th and 1 to Dante Zanders, who might be the least athletic of our tight ends. Or we're talking 3rd and 10, we're not running well, let's run a draw, and it doesn't work. So there were a lot of questionable play calls. But when you're running, going back to passing, you're running that easy completion shovel pass, or you're running the second play of the game where you're doing the jet sweep to Ricky and you toss the ball up as he runs by, and that counts as a pass for 1 yard. Yeah, as I said to some people that I was sitting with at the game, completion percentage can be a big misnomer. If you're throwing tons of completions, but you're only getting between -2 and 4 or 5 yards, and most of those 4 or 5 yards were on like 3rd and 8 or longer, then how much does that really matter? Would I rather have 70% completions and throwing a bunch of screens, many of which are not successful, or would I rather have 50%, but those 50% are 15 to 20 yards? So it's easy to say now it's good if we could have 15 to 20 yards and have 70%, but there are times, okay, we've got a better completion percentage, but what are we actually looking at? And again, the 10 of 31 is not counting things that went longer. These are simply passes that at the end of the play, we only gained between -2, which I think was our biggest pass loss, and 4 or 5 yards. I did look that up because I was very curious. The INT, kind of an O-line INT, kind of getting Burnt's rushed. Some people say, well, it hit Ricky's hand. Ricky was turning around on what looked to be a stop route, and the ball was outside of him. Plus, he didn't have his head around yet as he's looking. Lucky to get a hand on it, or unlucky, we could say, because it popped the ball up. We did see some of that last year, and if you're going to blame AR for it, you've got to blame Mertz for this one. It wasn't anywhere where Ricky got both hands on it. I mean, heck, last year AR put a ball on a 3rd down against Mizzou, put it where only Ricky could get it. Ricky got both hands on it, dropped it. People were saying, well, that's on AR. Well, we got to be intellectually consistent and say, well, this was in a lot worse position where only he could reach with one hand. That's probably going to be on Mertz, and it put the defense in a bad position. But with that said, Mertz, again, did make some good plays. It's not his fault that all we called was screen passes. Now, again, I saw this earlier on Twitter, kind of drove me insane, where people said, well, we have to run a bunch of screen passes because the offensive line was so bad. One of my other keys for the game was a quick passing to back off a 7 to 9 man box or things like that. Quick passing scheme to punish blitzes. The screen pass is not the only route that is a quick pass. You could have quick slants. We ran 1 or 2 in the game. One got us a 2-point for conversion. The other got us a third down. Maybe we could run those on less predictable times, like first down, second down. We could maybe get one of our freshman receiver we didn't really see much of, like a Aiden Mizell or Andy Jean. They get lined up against a guy. Yeah, run that quick play, run that pass, and run a quick slant. Run maybe a quick shallow crossing route. Where instead of just up slant, it's just let me run just in front of the line. So this guy's got to now chase me probably through some traffic, and this guy could be open and run, but instead it's like we're just gonna try and screen them to death, and that's not gone to work. I do believe that some criticism of the play calling is fair, and we will see what happens with that. I do think there's also, the O line was causing problems, so we couldn't run the ball, and we also have to give credit to a very talented and somewhat experienced Utah defense and front seven. Of course, again, they lost Reed early, but these guys came in, they played well. They held us, they took advantage of our offensive line, and there are some decent players on that offensive line. So, got to give Utah some credit, but you also have to say there are things that we did that hurt ourselves, playing undisciplined, getting penalties. But again, things we can glean are if we can get the running game going and maybe get a little more creative in our passing, which again, going back to that 333 number, how much was before we were down by 3 scores and how much was after when they were essentially just trying to play everything underneath, keep everything in front of you and run the clock, for defense. But if we can get that running game going, then, sky may be the limit for this team, but it's going to come down to that offensive line. We've got 2 offensive line coaches, and right now they've got 1 top 900 offensive line recruit. So if you're going to tell me that 2 offensive line coaches are what we need, we're going to need to see better offensive line play. And it's not like they're dealing with a bunch of true freshmen as starters. They're dealing with guys who have played multiple years of college ball. Some one at a big program like Bama, another one who's played years at Baylor. You got a great guy in Austin Barber from last year. We've had Leonard George, who's been around the program for a while. It's his second year in the system. And we have Jake Slaughter, it's his second year in the system. So I expect a little bit better results than 5 sacks. With that said, again, if the O-line can get it together, this offense has some flashes that it could be dangerous with some decent play calling. Now let's talk about the defense again. Only allowed 270 yards. Let's talk about the 3 touchdowns they gave up. First touchdown that they give up of the 3 touchdowns, 70-yard touchdown pass thrown really well by Bryson Barnes. However, it looks on the replay to me like it's a cover 1 play. Cover 1 meaning that there's a single high safety, which was RJ Moten. If he does the basic rule of being a safety, which is don't let anyone get behind you. If he just stays back and waits for the ball to get into the air to come downhill, that ball I don't think is a completion. Instead, he tries to cut off one route, and unfortunately, Jason Marshall's doing what he should do, playing outside leverage on Money Parks and thinking his single high safety is going to be at the other end. So if he's funneling him this way, he's trying to funnel them to the single high safety where they can essentially double team. Unfortunately, instead of RJ Moten being here, He's down here playing this other team, and that's where you see him having to run back and trying to catch up with Money Parks as the ball comes in. And of course, he dives, takes out Marshall, and it's a 70-yard touchdown play. That's, to me, that's a decently simple fix, and that's just being disciplined and not biting on a play before the ball's in the air. Yes, it's a mistake. Yes, it's frustrating, but it's an easy fix, and it's just about being disciplined. Let's talk about the second touchdown. We had Utah stopped. We have a very stupid penalty that's easily avoidable with two guys with the same number on the field, which was Marshall and Trey Wilson. Someone threw out there, well, it's probably because Trey Wilson was wearing 21 until right before the season started and he changed to 3. Someone cleverly put out there a screenshot that Devin Watson, or, Big Des Watson, you can tell it's late for me, that Des Watson was also on the field. So you would have had double 21s if that were the case. So clearly something's going on that needs to get fixed. Billy Napier today said it's a very unique situation, won't happen again, and hopefully it won't. But the point is, we had to stop, and then we gave them the ball back. And then shortly after that, Nate Johnson makes a 27-yard touchdown run, does a great play. We miss a few tackles on that play. It just is what it is, but we should have had a stop, and they should have had an opportunity for that score. And then in the third quarter, we throw the pick I talked about. We don't throw that pick. Utah doesn't get the ball in the red zone, and maybe they don't drive down and score. So the defense gets put in a bad position twice, by units that weren't their own, and just a stupid blown coverage. So I think the defense did better overall. We didn't get home, which I thought we should have, but I also said that this was a very talented Utah offensive line. I think there are things that we could do better. I do believe TJ Searcy, a true freshman, was doing really well on the defensive line. I'll be honest, I didn't notice him as much live, but watching the replay, do look great. Princely needs to step it up wearing that number 1 jersey. With that said, Shamar James, true sophomore, 13 tackles, 6 solo, 1.5 tackles for loss. That's great. Definitely good on him. It was good to see, Jordan Castell, first ever college football game, true freshman on the road, 7 tackles, including 4 solo tackles. A guy that's only going to get better in time. And I say that because it's easy to think of all our defensive problems in the past and, oh my gosh, we gave up 24 points. But it's also like, let's look at the context of that 24 points. Granted, they did miss a field goal, but with us only having 7 guys on the field, which that's unacceptable. But that 24 points is mostly correctable mistakes, whether it's giving up a first down because of stupid double jersey penalty, or whether it's, hey, the safety bit down instead of being disciplined. Okay, well, let's fix that discipline, have them stay back in that cover 1, and this thing doesn't happen. So I am trying to be a little bit nicer on the defense, but the fact is the facts. I mean, 3 of 13 on third down. Last year we were giving up 50%. We gave up less than 25%. That's great. Something to definitely be happy about moving forward. Obviously, things we need to work on: mobile quarterbacks and defending them. Nate Johnson, 6 carries for 45 yards against us. We want to make sure that we can lock down a little bit better on mobile quarterbacks, because we're going to face guys like Jordan Travis, Jaden Daniels, who can escape the pocket and can cause problems. And so things to look out for and do. But again, I'm telling you all this because I do see some positives, and I know there's a lot of negative out there, and it's not fully undeserved. But with that said, definitely a lot of things that the Gators could do. But we also did play a really good Utah team. And granted, they're missing 8 to 10 starters. They're missing their quarterback. They're missing their top tight end, 2 guys I thought would be crucial. And that doesn't help because I do have to think the question needs to be asked, what would it look like had Rising and Kuthi played? Would this scoreline be worse? Or maybe would we be able to, if Rising plays and not 100%, maybe he's not as mobile as Johnson was. Maybe, we don't see Bryson Barnes type passing performance. So you never know. You never know what could or couldn't be. But we're just going to leave that at that. The defense showed some signs of being better. The offense, there are things they did well, things I think could help them. I think if the offensive line starts playing well, this offense could be somewhat dangerous. I do think there does need to be more creativity. But overall, things are what they are. And with that said, Gator fans, I don't care what side you're on, whether you're on, hey, I'm going to endlessly sunshine pump, or whether you're on the, I'm not sure if I can do this experiment anymore. I will say this: if you're talking about firing the coach this early, that's dumb. If you're talking about, well, you can't expect a bunch of players playing together for the first time to be disciplined. No, that's ridiculous. I just watched Colorado be disciplined. Most of those players have never played a game together before this year. And I'm not here to say, well, Coach Prime's the best. I'm here to simply compare the logic of you can't expect a bunch of players who have never played a game before to look prepared. And then I go watch a team that's full of transfers that have never played before look prepared. We can have the intellectual honesty to say, yeah, there are things that need to be fixed. And we can have the intellectual honesty to say this coaching staff could get better at the things that we have problems with. What I don't like seeing from Gator Nation, what I think is complete crap, is when I see anyone offer a valid critique and it's, oh, so you want the coach fired? Well, no. And when you do that, you're acting like a Georgia Bulldog. And that's because you're painting the fan base in a total negative light. And you could just be honest. Yeah, I'm going to admit things could be better, but I believe Billy's going to get it fixed. How hard is it to say that rather than making up some things that aren't being said? And I'm seeing way too many people having to defend themselves on that. Like, hey, I think some things are wrong. That doesn't mean I want them fired. I just think these things need to be fixed. And because I'm seeing so much of that or seeing dumb stuff, and I saw this multiple places, well, the fan base, and when you say that, you're talking about the whole fan base. The fan base expects a championship by year 2. No one's realistic. Again, if I were a Georgia Bulldog and trying to make Florida look bad, that's exactly what I would say. Rather than saying, hey, for the most part, this is what we're saying. Here's why I hope we'll get better. And that's why you'll hear on this podcast and you'll see me ask about objectivity. A few weeks ago, I asked people on Twitter, at least on the personal page, I said, hey, what is your win-loss record? What is your minimum acceptable win-loss record for the season? Generally, most people said 7-5. We're still in that range. No reason to get upset. Many people thought this game may be a loss. Now, I will say, most people are not upset that we lost. I think that's another thing is the intellectual dishonesty of saying people are quote unquote crying because of a loss. When it's most people aren't upset because of the loss, it's how we lost. Have the intellectual honesty to grapple with that, to grapple with the discipline issues, to talk about some of the play calling issues, to have the honesty to say there are more quick routes and sometimes better routes than just screens to, deal with 7, 9-man boxes. But when you don't do that, it splits this fan base because you're basically painting a lot of people more terribly than they think. And I don't think that's cool. And also, like I said, I don't think it's cool for the people to say that's fire him. one of my good friends said, fire him and hire Dion. I said, nah, bro, that's not it. That's why, again, deal with the objective, be a fan of a top 5 public university, and have the intellectual honesty to discuss what people are actually saying rather than making up some straw man or changing what they're saying to fit whatever narrative you want, because that's nonsense. Let's be better as Gator fans. Let's be more together as Gator fans. And first thing is being able to speak with each other's ideas as they have them and not manipulate them just to fit whatever narrative you're trying to seek. There's plenty of good out there, there's plenty of bad out there. We can discuss the good and the bad without acting like Georgia fans. And that is the hard truth. With that said, I do want to thank all the Utah fans. You are great. I believe it's Sam Winder. Yes, you gave my mom perhaps her favorite moment of our trip to at least to Rice Eccles when we met you. So definitely kudos to you. Shout out Utah Pig Bus. You guys were great. Definitely a good atmosphere. I got to meet with some Gator fans that I've interacted with online for years, never met in person, such as Mike, whose Twitter handle is at Ruin Saturdays. Interacted with him on message boards and Twitters for years, never met him face to face. It was nice meeting him, as well as my Twitter buddy Marcus, and I apologize. I believe it's Dr. Pepper MD 21. Good guy. And of course, the main shout out I gotta give to is for Ute fan Ivan, not just for coming on and doing the interview, but also just being so awesome when I met you and your brother at your tailgate. And I've got to say, if you listen to the interview with him, this is a good guy. He talked about how a UF fan spit in his face last year, which is not cool. Don't ever do that. But when I'm standing next to him, this guy is so much taller than me. And I said to him, I don't know who would do that, because I feel that you're just going to knock me out just standing next to you. And of course, we had to laugh about that. So definitely a good guy. You'll see later, I'm creating a Sights and Sounds of Utah video where I'm going to have some photos, some videos, such as the moment of loudness and some things from the pregame, Gators taking the field, things like that. I'm working on a video for that. But one thing we did was Ivan and I, we switched hat. We did a hat exchange where I gave him a Gator hat. He gave me a Utah hat, just kind of as a keepsake for each other. I did wear the hat with Gator gear out to Lagoon, which is an amusement park near Salt Lake City. And with that said, Utah is such a beautiful state. I think I said it earlier. Gators, if you ever get out here, definitely check it out. I heard some Utes say they've never been to like Zion or Bryce. Get out there, beautiful places. I should have spent more time there, but still check that out. Although I've got to say, I had a few scary moments due to some rain. And that's all I'll say here. That's a story for another time. But if we're speaking about rain and possible scary moments, it is storm season. And with storm season comes the need for lawn work. So if you need lawn work in the Central Florida area, please give my friends at Alvarez Lawn Company a call at 407-490-2617. Once again, the number is 407-490-2617. You can also reach them at alvarezlawncompany@gmail.com. Alvarez Lawn Company, building plans that work for you. Also, I know some people say message boards are for old people. I prefer Twitter. Well, I do write-ups at gatorchatter.com, reviewing, previewing different games. A lot of what I do here, although sometimes there's different info, sometimes there's more detailed info, because there's print and speaking kind of lead to different things sometimes. And sometimes I have notes in front of me that I don't have elsewhere. And so things are what they are. But also, if you're on Twitter, sometimes you won't see a tweet for days and it'll be about some random event in the game. Meanwhile, message boards, you're going to have, here's the game thread and everyone's talking about it. And here's, our thoughts on stadium renovations or whatever it may be. Hey, who wants to talk about the FSU LSU game? And so the way I see it is Twitter message boards are all the same thing, except for one has a spot for all the messages on a single subject, and one is just a free for all. I like them both, enjoy them both. But if you want to check it out, definitely give my friends at gatorchatter.com a shout out. Go ahead, look them up. Definitely a lot of good groups going on there. Gatorchatter.com is your Florida Gators sports bar. I know I've said a lot, and I know this has gone a little long, and the audio is a little bit wonky, and my background definitely isn't as cool as usual. But thank you if you've bared with us to the end. Definitely thank you all for listening. And as always, go Gators.